Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday Build. This is episode 1.37, and today we're going to be discussing the topic Think Outside the Dock. Build automations with a cohesive strategy in mind. We're going to be featuring variables, client portals, bundles, and more. So my name is Brittany Hernandez, and I am a lawyer. I am a professional no-code, low-code developer, a legal tech educator, and the global ambassador to law schools for Gavel, formerly Documate. So in today's session, as I mentioned, we're going to really focus on how we can think outside of just document automation and really think more towards legal productization, in addition to internal efficiency and how we interact with our clients, especially when it comes to creating monetizable and scalable legal products. So this kind of came to me because there's been a couple of instances in the community where I've just seen people approaching the strategy for building something with a very sole document focused view. And I think it's really important to think, especially when you are the person who's building out these automations, either for your firm or for a client who is a law firm, for example, that you think about not only how can I make this particular workflow and document work with each other, but also how can I make this part of our overall strategy for the firm or practice itself. And that's really going to be the focus of what we're talking about today. And one of the ways you can think about this is from asking yourself the questions who, when, what, where, why, and how. So we want to think about things like who is the end user and target audience for this particular workflow and or this bundle. Is this something that we're going to be using internally only? Or is this something that we're going to be using where the client is actually going to be interfacing with this particular workflow themselves? And in that case, would it be more helpful if this person is logged in so that we can take advantage of data persistence? Or is this going to be something that we're going to be manually pushing data from a past session from a client into a future session? So if we don't ask these kinds of questions upfront initially before we even start building from a particular template or workflow, then down the road, it's going to be much harder to go through and undo what we're trying to do. So that's why I thought it'd be useful to start at this particular session today, which is the conversation around thinking outside and broader than specifically a particular document automation for a single workflow or set of workflows. The other question you want to ask, as I mentioned, is when. So when is this person using this workflow or bundle in the process of the case? Is this something they're taking in the beginning? Is this something they're taking within a bundle? So this information is going to get fed from the initial workflow into the next one. Is this going to be something that they take at the end, right before they pay? Is this something that is going to be taken where we've been working with this person for a while, so we have a lot of their information? So these are the types of things we want to think about as well. For instance, let's say, for example, that you have a set of 3 workflows where you know that the client is going to be taking these workflows and they're going to be taken one right after the other. And you want to maximize the amount of usefulness you can get out of something like the bundles feature as well as the data persistence feature. So by default anyway, bundles is going to require someone to have an account and log in. But even if we were giving these different workflows to someone individually and having them take them, we would still want to consider having them log in, because then the data can move automatically from one workflow into another. So when you're thinking about that and the fact that it can be a much more useful for you to have your end client or user be logged in when they take these different workflows, then you can kind of consider a strategy for getting them to that point. At what stage are you asking them to create their accounts? So in one particular case, for example, you could ask them when they set up an initial consultation with you. So maybe in your flow, you have book a free consultation. And in your email that automatically gets sent to them once they go through and pick a time and put in their information, maybe you customize that message to say, in advance of your consultation, please take a moment to create a free account on our client and to create a free client portal with our firm. And then also we need you to fill out this initial consultation questionnaire so that we can gather some initial information so we can prepare better for a conversation with you. So that's kind of one place that you could ask them to do that. And that's a really good place because people are kind of now getting accustomed to when you need to get an appointment with the dentist or the doctor, they ask you to pre-fill your forms before you come in so that they can have a moment to review them and maximize the time that they spend with you. So they're kind of used to looking for that information and taking action in advance. And you can also make it to where there's a reminder, some type of automation or flow that reminds them if they haven't completed that workflow yet. So that's one place that you could do it. Another place might be if you have a store, for example, in your like a DIY solutions store, for example, and you have a bundle here, for example, maybe you have this open up or you have a section above here that says, before you purchase this bundle, please take a moment to create a free account on our free client portal on our account, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to think about who is taking this, like I said. So is this somebody who is a client or is this somebody who is a team member internally? And when and what part of this process are they actually going to be interacting with this particular workflow? So if this bundle is a standalone product, and maybe we don't need them to be logged in. Maybe this is something that's a one-off. But if this is something that a person who we're going to be working with maybe multiple times is going to be doing, we would probably want them to create a client portal or account for free on our subdomains so that they can then be logged in when they take these different ones. And in the process of creating these different workflows, we then would want to make sure that when we go in and are completing our workflows, we'd want to go into our settings and go under access permissions and make sure that it's only logged in users that can actually take this workflow. Because if it's anyone with the link, we would see their data in our data manager, but the person wouldn't be able to benefit from data persistence when they take future workflows. So that's one thing that you want to think about when you are putting these workflows together and thinking more outside the doc for the general strategy for your practice. The other question is going to be where. So where are they actually going to get the link for this particular workflow? So is this something that you have in an email to them? Is this something that you have that is on the in that automated email from when they book a consultation? How are they actually getting the link to this thing? So that's one of the things you want to think about overall broadly is where do I put this particular link? A lot of people are gonna, if it's going to be something that's part of your DIY solutions shop, like this, for example, the links would be going here where the person can say go to, and then when they come down and they say go to, they're going to be directly interfacing with this particular workflow from your website here. One of the reasons why this is important as well is when it comes to monetization. So the reason I say that is when you're building out a workflow that has a Stripe paywall, then you can put that anywhere, no problem. And if somebody can see and share the link for it, then that's okay for you because anytime they share it with someone else, they're going to be able to have that paywall wherever it appears is appropriate. If you are trying to kind of like use a different payment provider and then make it to where it redirects to that particular link when they pay for it, then you want to consider where the link is showing up, because if they have that direct link, somebody could just share that link with someone else and bypass that paywall essentially. So you want to just think like in this particular case, the link that they can see is actually not to the workflow itself. It's actually to the website where this record is kept. So where this particular workflow's link is stored, you could say. So here, I actually don't mind that this gets shared with anyone, because if this was something that I redirected to and so on and so forth, they can't actually see the link to this workflow inside of this modal. So you want to really think about where is this particular workflow showing up. So we've already answered who. So who is the end user? If it's somebody who's using this internally and they're going to be pushing information manually from a data manager, for example, or we have this, never going to see the light of day and we can use Zapier to automatically populate certain things, that's okay too. So one of the things you can think about is how weird workflows can look if you have a particular strategy in mind already. And what I mean by that is sometimes when you have information that's getting pushed from one workflow into another, and you know that for sure that it will always be taken in this order and it will never be taken out of order, then what you can do is actually put things from the first workflow into the second workflow that don't exist in the second workflow. As far as, let's say, for example, one time I worked on a particular workflow kind of sequence where I was using the kind of conditional logic from workflow 1 in the output document for workflow 2, because I knew that I was going to have this information pushed from workflow 1 into workflow 2, so that data would transfer even if I didn't have a variable specifically in workflow 2 for that particular one. So that's something that you can think about, and it will look weird inside of your workflow because you're going to have a little red mark that says, that you warning, like you don't have this variable in your output documents, or you have it in your output documents, but you don't have it in your workflow, and vice versa. So when you see that red mark, you can calm yourself and know that you will always be using it in this particular way, that it would always be that workflow 1 feeds into workflow 2, workflow 2 feeds into workflow 3, and so on and so forth. And it will look weird and maybe produce an error when you try to run it by itself because it's not meant to be used in that way. So back when I was working as an automator for Gigla, I had a client who I was interfacing kind of with their paralegal more. But that was the instructions I was given, was we have a client intake questionnaire, and internally we're going to always be pushing information from that master client intake questionnaire into all of these other documents. So what you can do with that is you can make things a default value from the original client intake questionnaire. You can push variables that, if you ran it by itself, it would look really strange. But that's kind of what we can think about when we're thinking outside of just the workflow itself and just a specific document that we are creating. So that's one of the things we want to think about as well. So one of the reasons too that I want to think about this and think about these questions of who, what, where, when, why, and how is the fact that, like, sometimes when and thinking outside of a particular document is, let's say we have this patent paperwork filed letter to client template, and we're trying to automate this particular one to look like this eventually. So when we look at the actual pieces of this particular letter, then we can see, let me just come back over here. We can see that we have things like the responsible attorney's full name, the date, the client's full name and their address and their email, and so on. Now, it could be tempting sometimes to think inside of this document and to just automate specifically the things in the way that this document uses it. However, if you're thinking outside of the doc and you're thinking in a manner of how can we use this in many different instances within our workflows and our overall broad practice strategy, then we might not build it exactly the way that this particular document calls for, and instead combine things in a way that we can use in lots of different places in the future, and piecing them together in that way. And actually the client intake questionnaire, or whatever the initial intake process is for your particular client, is you would really want them to be, 1, logged in, and 2, like completing all of those in separate pieces of information as much as possible that you can later combine in as many ways as you want to and as possible. So what I mean by that is, for example, instead of having it be something like client's address all in one block. So in this particular letter, for example, if we were just going to think within this particular build, the client's address only appears once, and it appears in a block type of format because this is a mailing address and a business letter type of thing. So in this particular one, it might be tempting to, let me just go ahead and use this one. So I'm just going to change this to the Wednesday Build demo workflow. So let's say we have this particular workflow and we wanted to ask them like, what's your prefix? What's your first name? Or like, what's your last name? Blah, blah, blah. So if we ask them, let's say, for example, we ask them in a text area question, what is your address? And we said something like contact mailing address. What is your, let's do your mailing address. Then when we save this and run this, when this person fills this particular information out, they're going to say something like 123 Client Street. And I'm going to say, I'm just going to make this one not required for a second. And so we're going to say this is 123 Client Street. And I'm in apartment 1. And that's in blah, blah, blah place, city, state, zip. So if we collect this person's information, which is a very important piece of information, which is their mailing address, and we only ever first collect this as this block, then this is going to be actually problematic, even though it will solve our immediate problem of needing to have this information fed into this particular section. And the reason for that is maybe in future stuff that we would do with this particular client, we need to just have their city somewhere in a PDF document that has all of this information separated out. But we only collected it this one way. So we would have to ask them maybe for the information again, or we'd have to go into and manually separate this information out. So the way that I would rather do this is to separate out these pieces of information by having a text question that asks for line 1. So what is, let's say, line 1 of your mailing address. Then I would have a line 2, which is not required because maybe they have an apartment, maybe they don't. Maybe then I would next ask for their city. So what city, or you don't have to say like what is, you could just say city, mailing address, city. And now we have so many more options in the future for how we can utilize these different pieces of information. So instead of only ever being able to utilize this information in this block format, we can actually now separate out in different documents or in different places and refer specifically to what city they live in, what their zip code is, what county they live in, where their address is. And also sometimes you need their information in line, meaning not in a block format like this. So if we think about this in terms of how we're building something for the future as well as the present, then we're going to be able to be much more successful in how we build our workflows and have our overall build strategy. So in these questions, we're asking, who is using this? When are they using it? What are they trying, what are we trying to accomplish? And where are they actually interfacing with this? We also have a couple of other things that we want to think of from a strategic perspective, which have to do with variable strategy, monetization strategy, and data persistence and management strategy. So these pieces all come back to that idea of where is this information coming from? Where are we sourcing this information? And what are we doing with it? So in this particular case as well, when it comes to variable strategy, I like to personally keep a master variable list where I can see all of the different ones that I've created, and I can make sure that I use them consistently throughout all of my subsequent workflows when this piece of information will be the same. So I consider contact to be the main contact, but this role can change to, so instead of saying, for example, let's say if I was doing this patent filing one, for example, this letter to the client to say that they have filed we have said to them that they filed their patent. Then what we can say is, or that patent application, instead of saying something like filer first name or applicant first name or whatever else, I can say contact first name, and that contact can take on many roles in multiple workflows in the future. So instead of saying like guardian first name, tenant first name, or whatever else, I like to use things like contact that we know that would be this contact. Opposing party, perhaps. We could say something like company. So we want to keep them general and specific. And that's the dance that we kind of play. That's the dance that we do when it comes to these types of things. What can be useful when you're considering variable strategy is looking at how other companies have gone about tackling this issue of being general and specific at the same time, which is, in this case, HubSpot, for example, is a great one to just say, like, if we wanted to go in and we wanted to see this is just a fake contact, so don't worry. If we wanted to see and look at all of the different kind of properties of this person, we can go in and we can get some ideas of how HubSpot actually deals with this particular information. So we have what kind of information are they tracking about this person? We can search for different properties. We can go into managing properties, and we can actually go through and we can see how we could add new ones as well. So we can look up contact properties, company properties, and so on. So we can see, like, okay, what kinds of information do they collect about a company, and how might we learn from how they've done it here? So we can see that the basic information about this is it is company information. We can see any rules that they've complied to this or whatever else. So anyway, if you wanted to just get some ideas of how people do this, you could also look at Clio, for example, where you can see that they have contacts, they have matters, and they continue to separate out contacts between individuals or people and companies. So you can see how you might start to think about your own variable strategy, even as we go into each individual person, that they say prefix, first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, title, company, and so on. Now, if you wanted to see how they, under the hood, call these different variables, you can see a list of them like this if you use your word add-in, which I can show you quickly here. Let me just quickly go in and log in to my Gavel word add-in. And you'll be able to see that when you have a workflow that has a Clio question, what it does is it gives you access to all of the underlying variables that have already been built out by Clio. So you don't have to manually go in every time and make new ones. So in this particular case, I can see all of the questions and variables. If I just insert all questions and variables, and I can see I have access to the responsible attorney's name and their number and the number of the matter itself, and all of these different pieces just from one click of a button. I get all of that information about that person. So you can just kind of get into the habit of kind of paying attention to what types of information is collected in these kinds of databases, like a Clio and a HubSpot and a CRM like these, case management and legal practice management tools like these. And you can start to see how you might also build your workflows to have a consistent strategy across all of them. The other idea is around monetization strategy. So this has to do with how are we going to make money from this? So how can we incorporate a strategy that allows us to make money from all of our hard work, creating and monetizing and scaling all of our different expertise? And one of the things you can think of is either single workflows. So let's say, for example, if you have a paywall, a Stripe paywall in front of one of your workflows. So let's say, for example, so if you go into integrations, you'll see that you can connect your Stripe accounts and as well as your Clear Managed accounts. But if you want to use the integration for Stripe, let's say that you wanted to go into this one, for example, DOB eligibility, then I would add a page that is the payment page. So we can just say payment page, and then we can put in a Stripe payment here. In this particular case, I'm just going to move it up to the first page. The question title is going to be the button text for, you can say like something like pay $35.99 now. The variable name can be something like Stripe payments, and then we can give a price in cents. So it would be $35.99 without a decimal. And then we can put this in test mode just for this particular example, save this, and then we can run this. So what we'll be able to see from this particular case is now I have a payment page, but prior to them being able to access our workflow itself. I would recommend that instead of just having it be a payment page right away, maybe you would give them a little bit of context first. So maybe you have a page that says something like, welcome, this is what this does, and this is this app is a way to determine whether you are eligible for whatever. So in that way, you're going to be able to instead first give them a greeting, just being polite, and then let them know this app includes these 5 things. So we can say doc 1, doc 2, etc. If you have any questions, blah, blah, blah. So you can give some context here before you ask them for money. And then they can go through and pay on the next page. Some people, what they'll do is make it to where the person goes all the way through to the right before the actual production of the documents, and then have them pay at the end. Some people also allow them to have a draft preview of the document before they pay for it. So there's a couple of different things. And sometimes it's required that you do that. So just consider your jurisdiction and what's required. But anyway, you can see how when we understand our monetization strategy and how we want to monetize these different workflows, that might change how we build them, where the payment page goes, whether the payment page has different logic attached to it. So maybe in our first question, we ask, do you have, do you have a discount code or something like that? I've seen this before. So it can be like, do you like discount code, something code like yes or no. And then maybe we only have this particular payment page show if discount code yes or no is no. So they don't have a discount code, so they're going to proceed to the full payment. So that's kind of how you can think about how you can say like, oh, so if they do have a discount code, they'll be directed to this place. If they don't have one, they'll be directed to this place. So maybe if they have a discount code, they're directed to some other like workflow that has a different price, et cetera, et cetera. So you can just think about that. But you also want to think about from a monetization strategy perspective, whether you might want to utilize the bundles feature, which allows you to take individual workflows and bundle them together. So let's say, for example, I have created an estate planning package of documents, but before bundles came about, I wasn't able to put them together. I had to have them individually, let's say, sent when, this person is ready for that next stage, or I had to have them in some other packaging way. I had to send them these links at different times and have them pay for them separately or whatever else. With bundles, now what we can do is take these 3 workflows that we need to have together and we want them to just pay at once. We can put those together in a bundle like this. So you would just say new bundle, give it a name. I'm going to say test the Wednesday build demo, give it a description. So this is a description. And then we say next, put in our workflow sequence. So I'm going to look for workflow 1, and then I'll look for our second one, and then I'll look for our third one. We can make sure that they have to be completed in a particular order, and then we can make them free or paid. If you want to have them paid, then you just need to go through the Stripe onboarding process to do Stripe Connect. So you just click here. We'll take you through the process. Once you have that set up, you'll see a slightly different screen down here where it will ask you, like, where do you want them to pay at what stage, and how much do you want them to pay? Do you want them to pay more than once at different stages? So do you want them to pay after the workflow 1? And then do you want them to pay like right before the documents come out? So on and so forth. So when you think about this from thinking more broadly outside of document automation and going into legal productization, you might consider how you could insert and utilize bundles and the ability to package different singular workflows together for different pricing, where you have, let's say, them do that payment right before they generate their documents or right before they go into workflow 2, and so on and so forth. And then finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that idea of data persistence and management strategy. So that goes back to the idea of, do I want this person that's taking this workflow to be someone who is logged in? Do I want them to be someone who is taking a package of workflows where they go 1, 2, 3? And I'll show you quickly what that might look like when you have someone who's logged in and they've taken some of this information before and how it pre-populates. So in this particular example, let's say I have this, let's try this one. Let's see what I have here. So I have the like workflow 1, workflow 2, and workflow 3. So if they go ahead and start this session, if any of the underlying variables have already been answered by this person before, they're going to be taken all the way to the end where they can just review their answers. It's going to pre-populate for them. And I love that about this. So here, they've already answered that their first name is Sohail, and their middle name is this, and their last name is this. They've already gone through and answered those questions in the past. So they don't need to answer them again. So here, all they would need to do is just verify their information hasn't changed. So let's say if they have updated their email address or whatever else, then they can return to that bundle overview and go straight into that second workflow. So they can go through, they can pay if they need to at whatever stage, they can generate whatever documents at whatever stage. In this case, they've already answered their first name in the previous workflow, as well as whatever previous workflow they've taken. And they've already answered their date of birth question in the previous one, so it's going to take them straight through. And then they would just answer any ones that haven't been answered yet. Then we can return to the bundle overview and see that we are already on this last one, and they haven't had to do anything except verify their information. And that comes from that variable strategy we talked about before, where I've made sure that these different variables, these 3 workflows, have the same variable across information that's going to be the same for this particular contact. So contact first name, contact middle name, contact last name, contact date of birth, or DOB. So that makes it to where I can feed all of that information streamlined all the way through, and the person just needs to go through and either verify this information and generate these documents at different stages, or they just take one major workflow that does all of this and like populates all of the information. So that is how you can consider who's taking this workflow, when are they taking it, what is it, what's it for, where are they taking it, why are they taking it, and how are they taking it, and how this kind of all feeds back together as a cohesive strategy for your practice or business. Also, we've talked about variable strategy, so making sure that you can benefit and harness the power of data persistence and management from one to the other, one workflow to another, how you might be able to monetize and consider your monetization strategy as you build. So am I going to put a paywall at the beginning of a workflow, or am I going to package these together into a bundle? One of the other things you consider around data persistence and management is, do I have a Clio account or another integration that I could use where the data source is already there and I don't have to create variables for every single thing? Is there something that I could do to make this more efficient, where I wouldn't have to each time put in what's the person's first name and their last name and their You do have your data manager if you wanted to take advantage of that, like you have here, for example, and have that information get pushed around and used in multiple workflows. But if, for example, you had a Clio account, then you might be able to access all of these different variables without having to build them out yourself. You would just need to make sure that that information at some point got input into your Clio account in some standardized way. So that is all for this particular session of the Wednesday build. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm very happy to connect with you. Just a few quick announcements before we wrap up. This has been an episode of the Wednesday build where we have new episodes live every Wednesday. I also put out a new issue of Code Word Hex every Tuesday. I also put out a free weekly newsletter called the Tuesday Forecast. I also have Gavel certification courses on the Chromium Academy website where if you'd like to join us, we actually start Basics Week for Core 5 tomorrow. So you still have time to join us. Just go to the chromiumacademy.com website. We'd be really happy to join us for our Basics Week. We're going to go into Basics, then we'll go into Silver, then we'll go into Gold. You can also test out if you have a lot of experience with the Gavel platform as well. I also have courses in Software and Airtable, Go Full Page, and more to come. We also have a global community called Chromium Global, and you're welcome to join us in the Slack group for the Gavel community if you'd like to join us there as well, which is also free. So thanks again for being here for all of you that are with me live, and for those of you that are on the recording, hello. We're going to be meeting again next Wednesday, September 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, where we're going to be talking about make something from nothing, how to break the seal of the blank page, the dreaded blank page of what do I create? How do I come up with ideas? And you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn or via email at brittany@chromium.pro. And then for any inquiries that are related to Gavel's law school program, just feel free to email me at brittany@gavel.io. So that is all for today. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.